This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Oral questions. Questions orales.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister believe in the decriminalization of crack in children's parks, meth smoking in hospitals, or other hard drugs on public transit? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we believe in working with British Columbia and with any province that wants us to work with them on this, which is why we accepted their request to modify their pilot project on exactly those issues. This is something we will continue to do, to work in a basis of science around compassion and a medical approach, a health approach, not a criminal justice approach to dealing with the toxic drug supply and addictions. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we won't be taking lessons from the Conservatives that continue to chase after a Harper-era policy that their own advisors said was obsolete.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's an important question, Mr. Speaker, because we need to know what he's going to do next. I just gave him a chance to indicate whether he believes people should be allowed to smoke crack in children's soccer fields or meth in the faces of nurses in hospital rooms. He refused to answer, which begs the question of whether or not he will try to impose the same radical and extremist policy elsewhere. So once again, does he believe that people should be allowed to smoke meth or crack in children's soccer fields?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, obviously no one in this House does. That is why we agreed with the British Columbia government to modify their pilot project to better suit their concerns. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we've seen the extent to which the Leader of the Opposition will continue to try and use tragedies and ongoing challenges Canadians and vulnerable people are facing to try and score political points. It's the same reason he's said that he will suspend people's fundamental rights and freedoms to score cheap political points. That is not something that Canadians want to see, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister legalized the use of hard drugs like meth, crack, and heroin in children's parks and in hospitals, and he won't rule out doing it again. This is not an academic question. The City of Toronto submitted a 153-page application, and I quote, seeking an exemption under Section 56.1 of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act that would decriminalize personal possession of illicit substances within Toronto's boundaries. The Prime Minister's government has been working secretly with Toronto on that plan ever since. Will he, yes or no, rule out decriminalization in Canada's biggest city?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see the Leader of the Opposition trying to score cheap political points on the backs of vulnerable people to promote an ideology that does not work. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to be there with a thoughtful, compassionate-based public health approach on the toxic drug supply, and that means working with jurisdictions. When Vancouver asked us for an exemption, we said no. We would only work with the province, and that's what we did to work with BC. The same thing when it comes to Ontario or Quebec. We will only work with the provinces to ensure any projects they have go.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So he refuses to rule out repeating this disastrous experiment that killed 2,500 British Columbians. It's because he strongly supports decriminalization, and if he got a chance, he would do it all over again in Toronto, in Montreal, and anywhere else. Mr. Speaker, the final question, therefore, is even the radical NDP government in BC asked for him to reverse his decriminalization. Why did it take him 10 days and 66 more deaths to do it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
again, Mr. Speaker, we see the extent to which the Leader of the Opposition will make political attacks on the backs of the most vulnerable people in this country. We actually only received the completed request from British Columbia Friday last week and approved it the following Monday, 3 days later, Mr. Speaker. We will always respond quickly in a science-based way when people's lives are on the line. The Leader of the Opposition is continuing to spread falsehoods, Mr. Speaker, instead of actually following the facts and caring for Canadians.
Hear, hear. The inquiry, concerns around the participation of busloads of Chinese foreign students and falsified documents for the Don Valley North nomination came to light. The Commissioner noted that Chinese foreign interference activities could have made a difference on who was nominated in Don Valley North. The Chinese media reported that the nomination was won by 14 votes. The Prime Minister cannot continue to pretend there is nothing to see here. Based on the damning findings, what action will the Prime Minister take now?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I thank our colleague for the question, and far from not taking this matter seriously, our government has done the exact opposite. Our colleague knows well we have put in place a series of measures now over a number of years to deal with the very real threat that she identified of the Chinese government seeking to interfere in the democratic process in Canada. All political parties, and not just at the federal level, Mr. Speaker, face this threat. That's why yesterday, for example, we introduced important legislation in this House, and we look forward to working with colleagues to hopefully pass it quickly.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
If you're under 30 in Canada, it's nothing but doom and gloom according to Bloomberg Nanos. Gen Z's confidence in their pocketbooks is at the same level that it was in the first months of the pandemic. That's a 16-year low. The budget they said was about generational fairness has turned out to be a monumental failure. Instead, young Canadians keep getting higher spending, higher inflation, and higher interest rates, and they get nothing for it. The Prime Minister was voted in by young Canadians. Why won't he admit that he's destroyed their futures, step aside, and let Conservatives fix everything he broke?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our budget is about generational fairness and investing in young Canadians, investing in the housing, in the affordability and the economic growth that they urgently need. But you know what else young Canadians need, especially young Canadian women? That is control over their bodies. You get that control with free prescription contraceptives. The Conservatives are voting against our budget because they don't believe that a young woman should control her life and her body. We won't let them do that.
I'm certain all members would like to hear the question from the member of Thornhill without interruption and also hear the answers. I'll ask all members to please do so. The Honourable Member from Thornhill. So cherry-picking data, misinformation, and lecturing Canadians, telling them that they are wrong. That is a choice, Mr. Speaker. Millennials are telling this government that they can't pay their rent, that they can't pay for groceries, that they can't get to work. Even the bank governor confirmed that $61 billion in new spending is, quote, not helpful when it comes to bringing down inflation and interest rates. When will the Deputy Prime Minister stop her inflationary spending so that young people stand a chance in this country? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
I notice, Mr. Speaker, that the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party did not clarify her own position on a woman's right to choose. Canadian women deserve to know. And you know what? They can't trust any of these Conservatives to actually tell the truth, because the Governor of the Bank of Canada, in fact, said our budget was helpful because we stuck to our fiscal guardrails. That is what he said, Mr. Speaker, despite Conservative attempts to portray it otherwise.
The Honourable Member from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, interest on our national debt is more than we spend on health care. The Prime Minister is spending more money lining the pockets of wealthy bankers and bondholders than making sure Canadians get the health care they need. On Thursday, the bank governor told the Finance Committee that government spending was not helpful in bringing down inflation and interest rates. When will the Prime Minister finally start listening, get spending under control to bring down inflation and interest rates?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, yet again, just basic disinformation from the Conservatives. What the Governor of the Bank of Canada said to the Finance Committee last week, and I quote, speaking about our budget, "I don't expect it is going to have a significant macro impact relative to our previous fiscal forecast." He said that meeting the fiscal guardrails is helpful. And Mr. Speaker, Moody's has reaffirmed our AAA rating. These are not partisans. Our budget is fiscally responsible. They're simply not telling the truth.
The Honourable Member from Charleswood St. James, Assiniboia Headingley.
The Prime Minister is just not worth the cost of housing. On Thursday, the bank governor also told the Finance Committee that housing will continue to be unaffordable into the future.
Shame.
After 9 years, the Prime Minister has destroyed the dream of home ownership in this country. Sure, they talk a big game, spending billions, but the results are double trouble. Housing prices, double. Mortgage payments, double. Rents, double. Can't they just get out of the way before things double again?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, it's difficult to accept criticisms from the Conservative Party when it comes to housing when both their record and their plan demonstrate they have no interest in solving the housing crisis. They're now campaigning on a commitment to cut funding for the programs that actually support home construction. They're campaigning on a commitment to raise taxes on new apartment construction that's going to help make sure apartments are available at prices that people can actually afford. And if you look at the record of the Conservative leader while he had the responsibility for the housing portfolio, he got a total of 6 affordable housing units built across the entire country.
Here, here.